And good morning, everyone. Super excited to be live this morning here on LinkedIn and YouTube for those folks there, but mainly the people on LinkedIn. So today I want to have a really cool conversation. We're going to dive into talking about secrets in code. You know how big a fan I am about getting them out, making sure that there are safe paths and simple paths that are engineering first. So engineers know where to put secrets so they don't end up in your code, or one of the things we're going to talk about today, inside your Docker images. We'll talk about code ownership as well. It's kind of a powerful mechanism to actually solving AppSec. One of the hardest things we have in the security industry is getting people to take ownership of what they have built and released into the wild. It's not because people are lazy, it's because it's hard. Over time, people change, so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about that, an article that came out around that today, and then some big, fun, exciting news. But coming out of today, you will get some thoughts on how to immediately solve some of the biggest problems we have in the security industry with secrets in code, secrets in Docker images. Now, you may be wondering, Connor, what's going on? Is it just you? Yes, today James is feeling under the weather. He will be joining us back next week, but today we are riding solo. So without further ado, let's get rolling. Pioneering solutions, transformational technology, and inspirational leaders. I'm your host, Connor Sherman, and this is the Confident Defense Podcast. So let's dive on in. I'm really excited about this. First and foremost, I want to share out a few of the articles that we'll talk through. And before I make sure the correct screen, let's do that, because that would be embarrassing. First and foremost, we're going to talk about, as I mentioned, secrets in code. So I've had a few folks come on the podcast about this, and I've got two episodes coming up shortly, which are going to be focusing on some of the top players in this space on how you dive deep into and how you solve this systemic problem that we have. I think secrets in code is at the same scale of problem that we have with software dependencies, right? So if we think about, we have this whole dependency lifecycle that's going on right now, where we're all sharing third-party libraries. We're not writing our own authentication libraries. We're not writing our own common practices. That's the great thing about libraries. We get to do these, but as we do them at scale and somebody starts to put backdoors into them, or somebody starts to do library squatting, right? Any of these techniques, or library squatting in order to put a backdoor in it, to be more precise. This puts us as consumers of these libraries at risk. So we have to be thinking through, as security leaders, how is it that we bring the tools to market such that our that our engineering community can build safely, build securely, but without slowing them down, right? So that's that constant dynamic, that constant tension. And of course, if you've been a long-time listener to the show, you believe that tension doesn't have to be negative, right? It can be more reinforcing, more of an accelerating function. So let's talk about this. So two firms I absolutely love in this space is Doppler. We've got a episode dropping on the podcast with their CEO in a couple of weeks. And then I'm really excited to see that we've got GitGuardian coming on as well in a few weeks as well. So you'll hear more and more about this in deeper and deeper conversations on the podcast. So GitGuardian, what they do is they're a team based out of France, and they've built this really cool tech tools to go hunting for secrets. And so they really are at the front end of saying, how do you find the risk? How do you bring this attention to the security team? And so they know where to spend their time and attention on fixing the systemic problem, where Doppler is a secrets management company helping you prevent the problem in the first place. Cool. So let's dive in. So this article they put out was really cool. They start talking about secrets in Docker Hub. Now, what's different about this is it's really easy to get your head and your hands around the fact that an engineer's, on their coding away, they put the secret in their code, they hit submit, it goes up to GitHub, it goes up to whatever your repo of choice is. And there it is, that plain text string just sitting in your code. But what happens is that's not the end of the story. These apps take on a life of their own, and you end up eventually getting to it running in a Docker, and on you go. So what they were saying is, let's go look at that other stage. When you have it built into a Docker, then what? What happens? So it's a really cool article. I'm not going to read through all of it, but what I wanted to highlight here is This is a mechanism. Once it's in the Docker image, a lot of folks share out those Docker images because so their customers can consume them and move faster. And that was exactly what happened to CodeCove. And with what CodeCove happened is they had credentials in the image that then allowed, which then was shared with their customer base because that was their part of their go-to-market. You just extract what was inside that Docker image, and now you've got credentials that allow you to get access to the Git repositories, and then they entered a backdoor into the product, and the rest was history. And then there's their breach. So again, it was secrets that got into the ecosystem, but here it just manifested itself inside a baked Docker image. And this article walks through kind of what is the Docker, what are the layers, where does the risk start to present itself, and how do we as security leaders detect it and remediate it before we end up in a breach scenario. So it was really cool. There was actually something else they talked about in the article here, which is a cool punchline. There you go. 7% of the images that they found on Docker Hub had a secret in it, which is just what? Seriously? So yeah, obviously, again, this goes back to this is a systemic problem throughout everything. So if you're thinking, I don't have this problem in my organization, pause, think again. Statistically speaking, you do. So really awesome, simple, accessible, really great blog. Highly recommend it. Follow the Git Guardian folks and dive into them. And yeah, I do recommend getting a handle on this if you are a security leader and your company makes money by shipping code. Cool. So with that, I'm going to leave it because I could talk for hours on this. In fact, I do. I have 2 separate podcasts coming, which are about an hour each. So with that lovely transition and plug, let's talk about something else that came up. So again, I'm a big fan of figuring out what are these systemic issues, like what are these high leverage problems that we have, right? Because you can have high leverage solutions where you put a little bit of effort into it and you get a lot of benefit. But we can also have small vulnerabilities and small mistakes or small habits that are bad. And then it leads to us realizing all of this risk. And sometimes that culminates in a breach, a data breach or a privacy breach. So just want to make sure see if anyone's come in on the chat so far. Let's pop over there. Cool. So this is a big one too. So Travis CI exposed these secrets for thousands of open source projects. So Travis CI is as it sounds like, it's part of a continuous integration pipeline. It's integral to a lot of to the deployment of a lot of tools and that life cycle. Well worth taking a look at this. It goes back to it's again part of these very much these safeguards that we talk about, these mechanisms, these boundaries that we have that you can put good security controls into and helps developers move faster. So it's not like throwing Travis under the bus. Like, it's a really great thing to have these CI/CD pipelines, top tier CI/CD pipelines. But of course, it is software, and software is vulnerable to having for vulnerabilities, right? So it can have them. So what's worth taking a look here is understanding if you are impacted around this. Just simple vulnerability. There's I think that's the headline right there, right? Environment variable injection into pull request builds. So take a look, dive in, see if your company's impacted by this. Again, it's a very popular CI tool hitting a lot of different organizations, and it's best to just get yourselves oriented around that. And yeah, nothing really to stay out of here, like big change, big difference. Again, it's just a piece of software that's instrumental to how we do business. And so we have to make sure that we're got a good patch management cycle around it. And then also that we're proactively monitoring it to see if it is getting exploited. So I'll leave you with that. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, right? So secrets, CI pipelines, all cool tech stuff. This is a little more about process. This is a little bit more around I like this article a lot because it's actually something that we're doing at the company I'm with right now. We call it something different, but the principle is the same. So this is from the Twilio blog. Super good people, super smart people over at Twilio. Definitely worth making sure you're aware on what they're saying there. So I'm like that. This is really cool. So as I mentioned at the top of the show here, being able to fix a problem starts with knowing who needs to come along for that ride, who needs to be there so that you are able to solve it. Right? You can't just go as a security team, just go changing the code of all these different services. Right? You don't know what you're going to break. You don't know. You're not going to necessarily maintain it over time. You need to make sure that the teams who own it and maintain it are involved in that decision-making process, that they have an opinion in how it gets solved and what gets solved. So anyway, what is cool about this is they're recommending this simple thing on about.yaml. We call it something different, but basically the idea is the same, that you have a specific file that's in every repo that designates who is the service owner, who is the maintainer, who is the decision maker. And it goes on to talk about a little bit more about it in detail. So just so you know, some things that we've done with this is we've taken a little bit further and said, not only do we know what squad maintains this or who the lead on this is or the subject matter expert, we also specify the Slack channels. And we will say, that way we can build tooling around it and say, like, when there's a Datadog, when there's a sumo logic alert for this thing, we inside that alert, we'll just go back over the API, pull in that thing and say, okay, make sure you route this alert to the right place. So it's really cool. Then you start to think like, oh, well, what about if we did notifications into PagerDuty and we had escalation trees built around it and stuff like that? Like, yeah, it's kind of a cool thing when you start really like leaning into this simple technique and building on top of it. So it's something I came across that just got released recently. It's something we've been doing elsewhere, but do this. This is actually one of those simple things that you're like, it's a simple path forward that solves a lot of problems. And I said before, some of the biggest problems we have in security is just around ownership. Who do you call into that? Who do you put in that Zoom room at 2:00 in the morning when a service has been compromised? That's actually a really difficult problem to solve unless you've got ahead of it. And this is a great way to get ahead of it in a way that is simple and maintainable. So applause to our friends over at Twilio. Great article. Good takeaway. Very actionable. I loved it a lot. So those are my tips. Well, not tips. Jesus, what am I? Tips and tricks for a better house. Make it smell like lemongrass. No, so these are some things I came across and I wanted to highlight here. Again, secrets management, understanding that we've got these core softwares like Travis and they have vulnerabilities, and then of course these simple things around ownership and being able to as a security leader know where to go and who to talk to when there are problems with the service. So the next one was kind of not as actionable, but just as fun and juicy and spicy. I liked it a lot. So let me just pull this up. As you know, I'm a big fan of Joseph Cooper's Thursday polls. He usually has some pretty good stuff out there. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger for the audience here. There we go. So last week we talked about it. There's like, how technical should the CISO be? And hundreds and hundreds of comments, and this, that, and the other. And it was a great conversation. If you just follow him for these polls, seriously. So now we talk about it. He wanted to talk about the Project Raven, former US hacker folks. Should the fines be given? As you can see, I ticked the box. Yes, they should be. But I don't hold a strong professional opinion on this. I would love to know what your opinion is on this. If you're say, hey, what on earth are you talking about? Just go ahead and Google it. There's effectively three former NSA folks. They did their tour duty at NSA. They left. They're highly trained, highly skilled. And then they said, oh, we'd like to get a job, please. So the UAE hired them. And they worked for a foreign government. And then they were found to be doing work like they did at the NSA, where they were spying on other governments. So technically, they're just contractors. They're just private citizens. Should the U.S. be fining them? Is there a violation of the law here? Like, what does this look like? Like I said, I think it's a fascinating conversation. It is a bit like it's more than the question is, of course, in my mind, it's like, do we view these folks as specialized software engineers, or are they arms dealers? Right? Like, where on the spectrum do we view folks who are skilled in our in exploitation, who are skilled in the ability to skills and the ability to do these exploits, nation state level stuff. So, we spend all this money in the US training up these folks to be adversarial, and what then? I think it's gonna be a fascinating conversation, just something fun, totally not actionable, but definitely grab some popcorn and see. I think this is how cybersecurity is going to get going forward, right? Especially for those on the offensive side coming out of the NSA and the three-letter agencies. Again, are folks like this considered specialized software engineers, or are they considered arms dealers or are trafficker in destruction? Like I said, right now I'm playing it a little conservatively, but we will see what happens as this whole story unfolds. So I know that was kind of short, kind of sweet today because we are missing the better half of the show, James. But I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on these articles. Drop us a comment in on LinkedIn. Let me know what you think. I'll be putting these comments in there so we can keep the conversation going. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Same place, same time. And of course, remember, episodes on the podcast are starting to come out on Wednesdays, and we're really excited about this. We'll have our first episode airing here since the summer hiatus on Wednesday. Until then, be safe, and I will see you later.